When we see the image of the plague doctor today, on this day of October 22nd, 2025, we often think of something strange or even frightening. The long bird-like beak, the dark hat, and the long coat have become symbols of mystery. Many people connect this figure to Halloween or scary stories from the past. It is easy to see why. The costume is unusual and unlike anything a doctor would wear in our modern world. It appears dramatic and theatrical, as if designed to create a sense of dread. But this common view misses the real story behind this iconic figure. The Plague Doctor was not a character from a horror tale. They were a real part of medical history during a desperate time. The true story of the Plague Doctor is not about creating fear. It is about the fight against it. These were municipal doctors, physicians hired by towns and cities when the Black Death or other plagues swept through Europe. Their job was incredibly dangerous, and they were often the only medical professionals willing to venture into quarantined areas. They were not always the most respected doctors. Some were young and still building their careers, while others had not been successful in private practice. They were paid by the city, which meant they treated everyone, rich and poor alike. This made them a very early form of public health official, serving the entire community in its moment of greatest need. The duties of a plague doctor went far beyond just seeing patients. They were a crucial part of the city's response to the epidemic. Their tasks were grim and varied. They would visit the sick to confirm they had the plague, a diagnosis that was essentially a death sentence for many. They also kept detailed records of the dead, which was important for tracking the disease's spread. In some cases, they were even called upon to witness wills and other legal documents, as they were often the last people to see the dying. Their presence was a constant reminder of the plague's relentless march through the community, a symbol of both the disease itself and the city's attempt to fight back. So, while the image of the plague doctor might look strange to our modern eyes, it is important to look past the mask. This figure represents a critical moment in the history of medicine. They stood on the front lines of a devastating pandemic, armed with the best knowledge they had at the time. Their story is not one of fantasy or horror, but a real human story of courage, duty, and the desperate search for answers in the face of overwhelming disease. They were a bridge between old ideas about sickness and the slow dawn of modern medical practice, walking through plague-ridden streets to do a job no one else wanted. The famous costume of the Plague Doctor was not a fashion statement. It was an early attempt at personal protective equipment, designed entirely for self-preservation. The most recognizable part of the outfit, the bird-like mask, was not for show. It was a kind of primitive respirator. The long beak, which could be 6 inches long, was filled with aromatic herbs and spices. This included things like mint, cloves, camphor, and lavender. Doctors believed these strong smells would protect them from the plague. This belief was connected to the miasma theory, a widely accepted medical idea at the time. The miasma theory was the dominant explanation for how diseases spread for centuries. It proposed that illnesses like the plague were caused by bad air, or miasma, which rose from rotting organic matter and other foul-smelling sources. People believed that if they could purify the air they breathed, they could avoid getting sick. The herbs inside the beak were thought to counteract the poisonous miasma, creating a protective barrier of clean air for the doctor. The 2 small eye holes in the mask were often fitted with glass lenses, further sealing the doctor's face from the outside environment. It was a complete head covering designed to keep the bad air out. Every piece of the costume served a specific protective purpose based on the medical understanding of the day. The doctor wore a wide-brimmed hat, which was a common symbol of a physician at the time, but also helped to shield them. They wore a long waxed canvas, or leather coat, that stretched from their neck down to their ankles. This heavy, non-porous material was intended to prevent the miasmatic air from touching their skin or their clothes underneath. The belief was that the plague could be transmitted through physical contact with these bad vapors, so covering the entire body was seen as essential for survival. To complete the outfit, the plague doctor wore leather gloves and boots to cover their hands and feet. They also carried a long wooden cane. This cane was a multi-purpose tool. It allowed the doctor to examine patients from a distance, pushing aside their bedclothes or pointing to areas of concern without having to make direct physical contact. The cane could also be used to push people away if they got too close, enforcing a kind of early social distancing. The entire ensemble, from head to toe, was a carefully constructed suit of armor against an invisible enemy, the dreaded miasma. During devastating plague outbreaks, such as the one that struck Italy in the 17th century, plague doctors were a common sight in stricken cities like Rome and Naples. Their methods, however, were limited by the knowledge of their time. Since the true cause of the plague, the bacterium Yersinia pestis, spread by fleas on rats, was unknown, their treatments were based on the miasma theory and ancient humoral medicine. This older system held that the body was filled with four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Sickness was thought to be caused by an imbalance of these fluids. To try and restore this balance, plague doctors performed a variety of treatments that seem strange to us today. One of the most common was bloodletting. The doctor would make a small cut to drain blood from the patient, believing it would remove the bad humor causing the illness. Another popular and painful method was lancing the buboes. These were the swollen lymph nodes in the armpits, neck, and groin that were a telltale sign of bubonic plague. The doctor would use a knife to cut open these swellings to drain the pus, hoping it would release the poison from the body. Beyond these surgical interventions, plague doctors prescribed various potions and remedies. These were often complex mixtures of herbs, minerals, and sometimes even animal parts. A doctor might apply a paste made of dried toads or onions to the buboes, believing these substances could draw out the plague's poison. They would also advise patients on their environment, telling them to avoid certain foods, to keep fires burning to purify the air, and to surround themselves with sweet-smelling flowers and herbs. These practices were all aimed at fighting the supposed miasma and rebalancing the body's humors. While many of these treatments were ineffective and sometimes even harmful, the work of the plague doctor was still important. They offered comfort and a sense of order in a time of chaos. Just by showing up, they demonstrated that the community had not completely abandoned the sick. They also played a crucial role in public health measures. By identifying the sick and recording the dead, they helped city officials understand the scale of the crisis. Their presence on the front lines, risking their own lives daily, represents a key step in the development of civic responsibility for public health. The era of the plague doctor marks an important turning point in the history of medicine. Although their understanding of disease was flawed, their very existence showed a shift in thinking. For the first time, cities were taking direct responsibility for the health of their citizens during an epidemic. By hiring a municipal doctor to treat everyone, regardless of their ability to pay, they were laying the groundwork for the idea of public health. This was a radical departure from a system where medical care was only available to the wealthy who could afford a private physician. The detailed records kept by plague doctors also contributed to a new, more scientific approach to medicine. By counting the dead and noting where infections were happening, they were engaging in an early form of epidemiology. These records, known as bills of mortality, allowed authorities to track the plague's progress and try to understand its patterns. This new emphasis on observation and data collection was a small but significant step away from theories based purely on ancient texts. It was the beginning of a move toward evidence-based medicine, where direct observation of a disease was just as important as old theories. The failure of traditional treatments during the plague also forced the medical community to question its long-held beliefs. When remedies based on humoral theory and miasma consistently failed to save patients, it opened the door for new ideas. This period of crisis spurred innovation and a search for better explanations. The eventual decline of the miasma theory and the rise of germ theory hundreds of years later owe a small debt to the failures witnessed by plague doctors. Their inability to stop the disease highlighted the urgent need for a better understanding of how sickness truly spreads. Today, the plague doctor teaches us a valuable lesson about facing pandemics. Their costume is a powerful symbol of how societies use the best available science to protect frontline workers. While their mask was based on a mistaken theory, the principle of creating a barrier between a caregiver and a disease is more relevant than ever. The plague doctor represents courage in the face of the unknown and the public commitment to care for everyone in a crisis. They remind us that medicine is a constantly evolving field, built on the lessons learned from past struggles and the tireless efforts of those who dare to confront disease.